Throughout this course, I've introduced you to various APIs and concepts related to WordPress. Everything we've dealt with so far can be put under the WordPress Core APIs. The WordPress Core APIs is the general term for all the APIs WordPress encompasses. First, let's understand what an API is. An API is basically a set of functions, variables, and classes provided by a system for you to use to interact with that system. In our case, WordPress is that system. We've already been using some of those APIs when we created our theme and plugin. We didn't have to create many of the queries ourselves or have to process a lot of the data. A lot of it was taken care of by WordPress. We used a list of functions provided by WordPress. This reduced the time required to develop a theme and plugin. In the resource section, I provide a link to all WordPress APIs available to us. As you can see, WordPress has quite a few APIs. I want to make one very important point about these APIs. All these APIs are available in both plugins and themes. So let's say we use the database API. You can use these functions when you're developing either a plugin or a theme. We won't be able to go over every API in this course, but let me give you a brief overview of each one. We've already talked about most of these APIs already. We've talked about the Dashboard Widgets API and Database API. The File Header API is one we haven't talked about yet. This API allows you to read files and search for file header information. If you can recall, file headers are block comments that help WordPress detect plugins and themes. If we were to open the main plugin file, you'll find the file header we created at the very top. These set of functions are what WordPress uses to read this information. You're more than free to use these functions if you ever need to read file header information. We won't be going over these, but it's always nice to know that WordPress allows you to use the same functions it uses. The next API is the File System API. This is an API we haven't gone over either. This API is what WordPress uses to update itself. Traditionally, to transfer files, you would create a form with an upload input and process the files after submission. However, this API goes beyond that by allowing you to securely connect with an external server and securely transfer files between your server and the external server. We won't be going over how this works because it's very uncommon to use this API. However, you're more than free to read up on this API to learn more after you're finished with this course. Let's keep going down the list. We've already gone over the HTTP API and Metadata API. The Options API is what we'll be covering in the next few lectures, as well as the Settings API. So I'll skip going over those for now. The Plugin API is the hooks, actions, and filters we discussed quite some time ago. The Quick Tags API allows you to add buttons to the editor, but we won't be using it as there are other and better ways to accomplish this. It's also outdated with the introduction of Gutenberg. We've also gone over the Rewrite API and Shortcode API. You'll notice there are two APIs here, which are the Modification API and Customization API. The Customization API is specifically for the WordPress Customizer. The Modification API is for theme modification settings which are saved in the database. These two APIs are connected together, but despite that, WordPress addresses that the two can be separated. You don't have to use Customizer API to use the Modifications API. You can add and remove modifications wherever you want. The next APIs are the Transients and Widgets API. We've already discussed how to use these. The very last API is XML RPC WordPress API. This API is a very special case use. It gives developers who make mobile apps, desktop apps, and other services the ability to talk to your WordPress site. WordPress provides developers a way to write applications that can do many of the things that you can do when logged into WordPress via the web interface. These tasks include publish a post, edit a post, delete a post, upload a new file, get a list of comments, edit comments. We won't be going over this API as this kind of stuff goes beyond the scope of this course. That pretty much sums up all the APIs. In the next few lectures, we'll work on improving the recipe plugin before we get into the more advanced topics.